Welcome to this month's passenger profile with taxi member James Thacker. Do you prefer James over Jim?
Either or. I get called both, so Jim or James, that's fine.
Okay, so I shouldn't call you either or.
No, not either or.
Okay, I'm gonna call you Jim just because that's what rolls off my tongue.
Right on.
Anyway, welcome to this month's passenger profile. I'm really excited to have you here doing this because we did a panel together at the Taxi Road Rally last November, and I thought you were spectacularly good on that. And normally, I would start out by going into your family history. Where'd you grow up? Any musicians in the family? I'm scrubbing that stuff today because of our phone call yesterday where you just jumped right into it. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to start out with the juicy stuff right at the top. So, uh, how would you describe where your music career is at right now?
Right now, it's at an interesting spot because I'm doing a little bit of everything. So to give you just a little background, I did spend many years as a live musician. All along, I was producing in the studio, working in the studio as well. And right now, I'm kind of doing all of the above. I'm doing music production, writing a lot with artists, doing live music, kind of fronting my own band. And I guess the only thing I'm not doing now that I've done quite a bit of in the past is teaching music. So
Okay.
I've done kind of all of those things. Now, right now, I think my career is in a great place. I'm doing a lot of music for TV film. That's kind of what I do most of now. I do a lot less live playing than I used to be. So I'm really happy with where it's at. That's for sure, because I love spending time in the studio and recording. That's probably my favorite thing to do, and that's what I get to do a lot of.
Yeah, me too. Look at my home studio right there, baby.
I know.
I wish that was my home studio.
I only have the wall of shame behind me, Albert.
Yeah, well, I'm drooling over all those guitars. Beautiful. Um, okay, so you're not yet making your full-time living from sync, but I'm guessing that that's your ultimate goal?
I am actually making a full-time living from sync. Yeah.
Oh, you are? Okay, good. Wow, you're even further along than I thought.
Yeah, and the
Um,
live performances I do too, as well. That's a supplement, but mostly right now it's singing. Yeah, up until about 3 years ago, I had I guess you call it a day job.
yeah, what
Or
was the
four
day
years
job?
ago, probably. I worked for a construction company that did software. It was like 3D modeling software.
Uh-huh.
So software where you design a building kind of in a 3D model, and they did all that because it would avoid a lot of litigation because you could have
Right.
and kind of set out a building, and if trades were crisscrossing or things were there was problems in the building, clash detection they called it. You could find that out from the model. So that was kind of my job for a while. I was the education guy, which was a fun job because I was the good guy who gave our software to the universities, kind of in the realm of Mac and I guess Pro Tools, where you have your software in the university with the hopes that the students come out and
Right.
are champions in the companies of your software. So it was a great gig. I basically worked from home, so I'd work a little bit, jump down in the studio, record some music, and so it was the ideal job. I also was still on the road a bit, so I just take a laptop and I'd be working from anywhere. And so I had that job for almost 10 years actually. And then about 3 or 4 years ago, they decided to stop the university program. New people came in, they didn't feel like it was valid, so they said, well, we're closing down the university program. So my job went by the wayside. And at that point, I had had enough traction in the sync world and TV film world that I said, well, I'm just going to make a go of it. I'm going to take a leap of faith and jump in with both feet and really go for this. And that at that point, then I would be in the studio 8, 10 hours a day, sometimes more. Just
And what was it that made you first think, sync is interesting to me, uh, and I want to start doing that, making that my main goal for the long term?
well, I think probably it has to go back quite a ways now for me because even when I was playing live full time, I joined Taxi, I want to say 15 years ago. That was the first time I ever joined Taxi. And this was back when we were doing the CDs with in the burritos and sending
Right.
them in. And
And
so
just for those of you who don't know about the burritos, what Jim's talking about is cassettes and CDs used to be the most common form of submissions back in the day. And we would have the members take their submission forms, which were on paper. They'd print them out, they'd wrap them around and put a rubber band and send them in a padded envelope. So, yep, you were a member way back when.
And then you'd wait a month and you'd get it something in the mail back. You get a snail
Right.
mail back with, accepted or returned.
And people were happy with that because none of us knew any better back then.
Right.
But you didn't stay a member for the long term. But did you join? And you came back eventually, which I'm sure we'll get to. But when you joined 15 years ago, did you join Taxi for the purpose of getting your music in film and TV, or was it trying to get songs cut or get a record deal as an artist?
It was mostly TV and film at that time, but
Yeah.
also, I was writing with the hopes of artists. That's how I ended up in Nashville. 12 or 13 years ago, I ended up in Nashville. At this time, I was in Boston playing in bands and working around Boston. And I had a basement studio there that I worked out of all the time. And I had just made all of this music that, of course, I thought was fantastic at the time. And I thought, hey, somebody else I knew was doing Taxi. And I said, well, here's a great outlet for my music. So I started sending it in. As I said, I think that year I did 40 submissions, and I think I had 2 or 3 forwards. And
And
so,
were you submitting stuff that you had already written and recorded and trying to do the square peg round hole thing, or were you creating music in response to the requests?
so the first half of the year, it was the square peg round hole for sure. I just had all this music, and I'd see a list and I'd be like, I think my music fits that. I'll send it in. And I'm sure I could look back. I'm sure all of those were returns. But then I started to realize, well, wait a minute, I have to really, really pay attention here. And I did a few songs that were just piano instrumentals. They were kind of almost like new age things. And 2 or 3 of those got forwarded. So I'm like, well, I kind of found my kind of a niche here. So it was, that's when I realized though that okay, a light bulb went off. And then, I had some other stuff I was sending in. I got some returns. And after that, I think I did 2 years at that time.
Okay.
Now, also in those 2 years, I didn't go to the rally. It was, I saw it and you guys were doing it, obviously, but I was like, oh, it's a long trip from Boston to LA. And, I can just do this from home. I got this. And so I didn't do the rally. That's kind of the key point. And so after a couple of years, I just kind of gave up on that and actually went back into live playing a lot more. I was doing recordings, but I wasn't trying to do syncing at that point. After a couple of years of Taxi, I kind of just, I wouldn't even say give up. I just kind of trailed off. I was like, no, it's not for me. I'm going to do live playing. And I was on tour with a couple of guys for a couple of years right after that. So then fast forward, I moved to Nashville. A couple of years after that, I moved to Nashville with the intent to just become a better writer. I had
Hmm.
met a few people here and they were just like, they're writing. I was just like, wow, I do not know how to write. These people really know how to write. There was a couple of really great workshops down here that I would come down to attend. I would literally come down here, stay with a few friends and attend these really great workshops.
Did you ever go to one of the Jason Bloom workshops at BMI?
Yeah, Jason Bloom was one of those. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Very, very good friend of mine. I've known Jason for easily 25, 30 years and such a great teacher.
Yeah, I learned a ton from his classes, and they were doing them at BMI at the time.
Right in that conference room with the white chairs.
Yeah, exactly. And
I've sat in on those.
yeah, they were great. Of course, it's 50 people in a room, and everybody, you're just like it's like a cattle call, but it was great.
Yeah.
And I learned a ton from those. So I decided, I'm going to go to Nashville and really make a go of writing. And of course, that was more geared probably towards artist writing for artists and getting cuts. And when I got here, I did that for a good 4 or 5 years and played a ton. I was playing like
Wow.
15, 20 nights a month. And that also was coincided with the time I got the job with the construction company. So it was probably 70, 80 hours a week at this point, just doing everything. And then somewhere along the line, I built probably a much nicer home studio. And I started producing music that I felt like I had reached another level at that point for sure. I mean, you never can really judge yourself. It's hard to, number one, you could be your own worst critic, but you also can think too highly of your music sometimes. So I said, well, and I don't remember what triggered me to go back to Taxi, but I saw something or somebody I knew was with Taxi. I'm like, I'm going to give this a shot again. So I joined Taxi and I started submitting again. This is probably 6 years ago now, or 7 years.
Okay.
I started submitting again, and it didn't take too long to get it forward. That was one thing that was nice, and it definitely kept me going, I think. But I submitted that year. I looked actually before I called. That year I submitted 70 something songs, in that first year.
Songs, no instrumentals, all songs with lyrics.
Songs and instrumentals, I'm sorry. So it was,
Okay.
but 70, I did 70 submissions that first year. And I had, I think it was 20 or 30 forwards, something like that.
Wow,
And
pretty good average.
I didn't know at the time. I thought, well, it's not even 50%, but
Yeah,
I've
but if you were a
actually,
baseball player, Jim, you'd be an all-star.
that's very true. So at the time I thought, boy, I'm not even 500 here. At that time I thought, I didn't know. And so a few people since then have told me that's actually pretty good. And then I also had two libraries contact me. Maybe that was the second year, but
As a result of those submissions?
yeah, I had a couple libraries contact me, and I started working with them, which was exciting. Kind of working hand in hand with these libraries and creating
And
new.
I just want to clarify for people who are going to watch this that don't know when he says libraries, he means production music libraries, not a library with Marion the librarian behind the desk,
Right.
checking your library card. He's talking about production music libraries, which are uh, usually boutique publishers, although there's some behemoth ones out there. They specialize in film and TV music. Why they call them libraries, I don't know, but they're a publisher. Anyway, please continue.
Actually, yeah. Thank you for clarifying that. Actually, so yeah, I had a little bit of luck that first year, and the second year definitely. And I started co-writing with a friend of mine. He joined Taxi as well, and we did probably double that the next year of submissions. And that second year, we both decided we're going to go to the rally. And so,
Big Taxi Road Rally, our annual
Taxi Road
convention.
Rally, yeah. So we said, well, we can share a hotel room. We can go out together, fly out from Nashville together, and we did so. And that really was a game changer. I mean, after going to the rally, a lot of light bulbs went off because the classes there had everything to do with everything I was doing that year or two before, and everything I was doing right, everything I was doing wrong. And it was such a clarifying weekend. I can't even describe, like, just being around that and hearing like-minded people as well, but hearing it described and defined about the whole process of how Taxi works, and also just meeting so many great people at the rally. I mean, the only way I can put it was a game changer.
Isn't it
And
mind
so,
blowing that, like, I don't know, 10 or 15% of our members come, but 80, 90% of our members don't come. And I beg and I plead, I cajole, I could do anything I can do to get them to come to the rally. They've got a million excuses. It's a $300 plane ticket. I don't know if I can take that Friday off of work. Please tell your fellow members or people who are thinking about joining Taxi or thinking about coming to the road rally, tell them what they're missing. Because I
oh,
know you're a fan of it.
absolutely a huge fan. I've been every year since, obviously pandemic excluded. But
Right.
so I've gone, I think I'm on my sixth rally. And that's funny because I'll talk to people, they're like, I'm on my 15th. But the only thing I can say about it is I mean, it's simple. Go. I mean, that's a simple way to put it. But what you learn there and what you see there, especially if you're a Taxi member submitting, it will clarify everything, and you'll be able to pitch better. You'll have much more success rate. I think you'll also understand where you stand in the scheme of things. Like,
Because of other music that you hear during the course of classes or panels and stuff.
yeah, it really raises the bar too, if that makes sense. Like what you hear, you'll be blown away by probably 80% of the music you hear. And even
But doesn't that depress you? It's like, wow, I'm not that good, or does it inspire you?
it inspired me. Like it made me realize I got to up my game. And I mean, I usually that's just the way I respond to that. And part of that is years, because if I was, I'm no longer 25. If I was 25 years old, I probably would be more defensive, more, depressed about it, and like, oh God, and give up. But I mean, I've been at it for long enough to where, I know you got to stick with it, number one, and I know you can always up your game. I know, and when I see people that they inspire me rather than threaten me or make me feel bad, it inspires
What
me to say, "Wow, I mean, I got to do better."
what aspect did you feel like you needed to get better at? The composing of instrumentals, the writing of songs, or the production or the mixing? Which aspects were your weakest, and that you realized that at the rally?
I was going to say yes.
To all the above.
I mean, I'm a perfectionist a little bit in that way, but I heard production and I was like, okay, my production can come up. my songwriting can come up. So I think all of the above, I could see improvements, but at the same time, it was really, I think it was the second rally. I played a song for one of the industry professionals there, and he literally flipped out about it and loved it and wanted to pitch it to some of his folks. And I was blown away. I thought it was a good song, but it was really validation that I actually wrote a song that somebody like that, of that caliber, could recognize it was a good song. And that was a huge moment too. I think that was the second or third rally I attended. And it was one of the classes where or one of the things where you pitch your songs, and they listen to certain ones, and they happen to pick mine and listen to it. And he really liked the song. And so that was really inspiring, because I realized, well, hey, maybe I can write songs. If this guy thinks it's good, that's validation, right? But so there is that too at the rally. If you have your songs played, even handing them off to the professionals that are there is a huge thing. I mean,
People don't believe that that's a real thing. Most people think people that don't come think I'm going to get on the plane. I'm going to spend $300 or $400 on the ticket. I'm going to get out there. I'm not going to know anybody. I'm going to feel like a wallflower. I don't know which classes to go to, who to talk to. And what are the odds I'm actually going to get to talk to somebody in the industry or give them my music? Can you dispel some of those myths, please?
Yeah, I would say that's absolutely untrue. I mean, you can't really, I won't say this way, but I don't think it's a great thing it's hard if you're a total wallflower, because you do have to, at the rally, you do have to get out and speak with people. But the first couple, I was pretty intimidated. I don't think I went up to anybody and introduced myself, but I had a couple friends there. We kind of stuck together in our little group, right, and kind of felt it out. The first rally or two, I was kind of feeling it out. But again, I think it was the second rally, I went to one of the listening panels, and my song got picked and played and really got a great reaction. That helps your confidence, right? So
it probably helped you.
I got to do more of this.
It helped your brand a little too, because I'm sure other people that might have known that was your song that got a good nod on the panel, then they're coming up to you, dude, congratulations. How did you write that? How,
Sure.
I've seen this happen where people become road rally stars from getting a song played.
Yeah.
So that's cool. And when you met that person, who was it, a production music library owner that heard it and
wanted a music producer?
Oh, okay, cool. Very, very cool. So tell me more about your rally experience. Once you finally started to find your groove, did the rally orient you more toward doing instrumental music or more toward songs, or still doing both?
I think at first instrumental music, because that's what I was doing at the time, a lot of instrumental music, and it seemed to be working for me, again, finding a niche or whatever. But it was I was doing more instrumental music at that time. I was doing some vocal stuff and producing with a few artists that I was working with, but it was mostly instrumental, and that's where I found the kind of the first success. Now, since then, in the last 6 years later, I'm doing probably 50-50 again. I'm doing vocal songs, getting back to the Nashville scene a little more too, but also doing, still doing instrumentals, still doing.
A lot of people have this question, so I'm going to ask you, because you're the perfect guy with the 50-50 thing going on. Oh, shoot, somebody's calling me. Sorry. Hi. Can you tell them I'm in the middle of a live video, and I will call them back around 5:30 or 6? Thank you. Put my phone on mute. Okay, I'm going to start that one over, and we'll have to edit that. So being somebody that does half songs and half instrumentals, a lot of people have the question, which earns more money? And you've been doing both now for a period of time. Have you seen any pattern as to which one brings in more money, or maybe which one brings in money quicker?
Boy, that's a great question, and I really can't. I mean, I think it's, for me, at least in my experience, it's pretty equal, because there are instrumentals that, I will say this, on the instrumental side, I've seen songs where the back end royalties, that the PROs, BMI, ASCAP put out, are just keep coming. Like, I'll get a BMI statement, and it'll be, that song's from 5 years ago, and I'm still getting, it kind of goes down. It's also goes on, but I'm still getting some royalties from that. Now with with vocal song, that's instrumental. With vocal songs, I do find that for me anyway, the upfront, what they call the sync fee, the upfront tends to be better because
Hmm.
it's usually an artist, it's a sound they're looking for, it's vocal. So I have found that, and I think that's pretty common. I know that's my experience, but I think it's pretty common. Vocal songs with the sync fees seems better, but the longevity of some of the instrumental songs that I have out there, it's crazy how the royalties just keep coming in on those. So it's in a different way. And vocal songs maybe have an edge because you do still get those royalties from vocal songs, right? So if there's a little
So,
bit up
what's
front,
a kind of a typical sync fee? And just for the edification of people who don't know a lot about sync fees, if you get something on a network TV show during prime time, ABC, NBC, CBS, or Fox during prime time, that's kind of the sweet spot for getting the bigger sync fees. Getting something in a Netflix show that's a streamer, it's going to be a lower sync fee, sometimes no sync fee. So there's a range. You get something in a TV commercial, it could be a 20,000, 50,000, sometimes $100,000 sync fee. What's your experience? What kind of placements have you had, and what's kind of the range of typical sync fees?
and you want numbers like
Yeah.
just range. Yeah. So basically, it really is a wide range that I've seen myself. And I would say anything for a sync fee, anything could be 50 bucks, maybe even $5. I've had sync fees. There's a
Wow.
thing, well, blanket licensing,
Oh,
you get
yeah.
these sync fees that it can be even $1, right? But you get a statement from a library and there'll be a huge list of blanket license sync fees. And it's
Let's
like
go back to
$1.
blanket. Let's go back to blankets in a minute because I don't
Yeah.
want people
Yeah.
to get
Sorry. I
depressed or off track about this.
don't.
Making a note to go back to blankets. I'm
Yeah.
talking about non-blanket sync fees. Your song lands in an episode of whatever on Fox Sunday night at 9 p.m. What kind of
So
sync fees do you get for something like that?
episodic sync fees, I've seen anything from 1,000 to 10,000 in that range,
Nice.
and everything in between. And it just depends on usage. As it depends on
Right.
each.
How long they're going to use it for? Is it featured? Is it background? All that stuff.
But I'd say the range is 1,000 to 10,000 that I've seen in the TV world. In the film world, which I'm doing quite a bit in the film world now, sync fees are about the same, but maybe not even, at least in the films I'm working, they're probably more in the 1,000 to 5,000 sync
And
fee.
are those indie films, independent films that mostly go to Netflix and what have you, or have any of them been big feature films that hit every movie theater in America?
I've had a couple features, and most of the rest have been what you would call indie up to, major companies. So just to that level, and I don't even know in the film industry what you say for budgets, but probably up to about 10 million, $20 million budget. When then you
Yeah.
get big budget, so it's somewhere in there for indies, but a couple of majors, and those obviously did pay it better. But it's interesting with film because they do have a budget. Films have a budget, and a lot of times they may want a big artist, and a lot of the budget goes towards that artist, right? So then they have 20 other songs to work on in a film, and the budget has to be portioned out. So that's where films can get interesting too, because depending on how much budget they have, and
And
every film has a
I'm
certain
glad
budget.
you're bringing this up because people think that like everybody in the industry is out to screw musicians, which I find not to be the case. There was a time period, and yeah, there have been some unreputable managers and labels that have ripped off artists in the past, maybe still are, but in the film TV side, speaking specifically about a music supervisor, let's say working on a movie with a $10 million budget, which is not a blockbuster budget, but that's a pretty healthy, real feature film, Hollywood picture, big studio budget. Um, Maybe not, it's not going to be a James Bond film or, a Star Wars budget, but it's a real film that'll make it into theaters. And they may have a $200,000 music budget in there. And let's say they want to license one song that the director absolutely wants from Aerosmith. Gotta have that song from Aerosmith. They might blow half the budget on that one song. And your point is really well taken that then they've got 100,000 left over for the other 20 songs.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it depends on budget. And to your point, in my experience at least, I have not run into any of that shadiness. I really haven't. It literally is, this is our budget for the film. Here is what we have, we pay you as much as we can. And it really, and the people I've worked with, at least so far in the industry, I haven't really experienced any of that firsthand. And I heard all about it, and I was concerned about it and had my fears about it, but I really haven't run into that. The one place in the music world where I did run into it was when I was playing live music. I would say 2 of the 10 booking agents that I ran into, it did some real shady stuff, but it was on such a level that they were like stealing $200 from me for a part of a
Yeah.
gig. Like it was funny, like crazy stuff, right? But
Right.
that's
Let me skim some of your fee, but we'll invite you back next time. Like you're supposed
exactly,
to cave
exactly.
in because yeah, sure, man. I'd love to pay you off.
Yeah, and so that was all due to lack of budget. If not enough people showed up at the club that night, they would try to work the price of the club down. But in this level of the industry, in the TV and film, for one thing, I don't see where, just knowing it's more tight knit than you could imagine too. Everybody kind of knows everyone. I don't know how people in this industry would survive if they really are messing people over and screwing people over, because word gets out. People know, everybody knows kind of what other people are doing. It's a smaller community than you'd imagine.
Yeah.
And people just, it feels to me like people just won't work with someone who's doing that, on any level. So, I'm sure it happens, but my experience has been good. And
I've actually, I've been running taxi now for 31 years. I can't think of one instance where somebody on the film TV side of the industry tried to stick it to any of the musicians. Now they may call you up and apologetically say, I've only got $300 in the budget for the sync fee on this. I'm sorry. They'll be a little, apologetic about it. And look, I understand if you don't want to license this for $300. And then you have to make the judgment call do I have an existing relationship with this person? It's like, man, I'll do you a solid because you've always been there for me. Or I'd like to have a relationship with you, so I'm going to do you a solid. And because you seem like the kind of person that's genuine about this, you only got $300 now. I have a feeling that you'll come back to me again for something that's 3,000 later. Sure, take it. And
yeah,
it's not like they're buying the song; they're just renting it for that one film.
yeah, absolutely. And that exact situation has happened to me several times. Just what you're talking about, it's almost apologetic when they come to you, and I completely understand. But I also have gotten to know several library owners and music supervisors pretty on a personal level.
Yeah.
And I know another thing about those guys is they're working 68 hours a week. I mean, they are working their tails off. They're not like the big guy with a cigar sitting back collecting everybody's money.
The
They're
wall full
working,
of gold and
they're working,
platinum. The bald head, the cigar. It's like, yeah,
they're
baby, I'm
working
going to make you a star.
exactly. They're working their butts off. I mean, literally, I would say all of the ones I know are just working their tails off, trying to get placements for the producer and the artist, and trying to do the best that they can for everybody. And they're working against budget, they're working against deadlines, all that good stuff. But they're not. I don't see anything nefarious out of them at all,
I
except for
don't either.
art
But you know
workers.
what? These are old wives' tales that they're somewhat mythical and they're propagated through the grapevine over years. I just did a taxi TV about a guy named Gene Oates that was the older, cooler, more experienced musician. My little farm town, Illinois, is a 13-year-old playing in a band, and whatever he said, we considered like it had come down from on high. That God Himself had delivered this information. We believed it to be true. And one of the things he always said is, everybody in the music industry is going to try and screw you. I have not seen that, and I've been in the real industry for 49 years. I'm sure it's happened. Anyway, let's talk a little bit about relationships. I know that you and I probably have several mutual friends, in the industry pro side of things. One in particular is a music supervisor whose name I won't mention so people don't Google him and inundate him, but his name begins with M. You know who I'm talking about. Um, how did you first meet that music supervisor, and tell us about how the relationship grew, matured, and the back and forth aspect of it?
So I'll try to make it brief, but it's interesting because the supervisor spoke at a rally, I think in 2018, 2017, maybe one of those.
Okay.
I saw him speak, and I had notes on my phone that I make of, I'd like to meet this person. I should introduce myself. So I'm making making my notes, and I really liked what he had to say. He seemed really genuine, really cool, really approachable.
Really
So
smart, I might add, too. One of the
absolutely,
best educators of all the industry pros I know, but I digress.
absolutely, absolutely. And so I wrote his name down, and I said hi to him and kind of introduced myself. And I said, can I send you some music? And so I did. I sent him, I think, 2 or 3 songs, and I never heard back. After that, that was like the rally. And so a year or two goes by, and this is an interesting thing because I'd kind of forgotten about the whole thing. You
And
just
you didn't send him music for any particular slots or targets. You just send him, hey, check out my stuff and see if
I
it's
sent
good
him, I
enough.
think it was a SoundCloud link with, like, 3 or 4 different songs that I
Right,
had.
but it wasn't in response to a need that he had. It was
No,
just check out my music.
which probably was a mistake at the
Yeah,
time. Not that
rookie
now.
mistake, but
He
you
gets
figured it
200 of
out.
those a day, right? He gets
Yeah,
200 emails a day that say, check out my new release.
right.
So, so a year or two went by. I think maybe it was 2019. So it was probably 2 or 3 years went by. And I won't even go into the whole story, but it was a strange, like 6 degrees of separation connections that came up. And his name came up again. And I'm like, I've never heard that. And I don't know, I thought about Taxi, and I looked at my phone, and sure enough, his name was on there. And it was a friend of a friend in the movie industry, a
Wow.
friend of a friend in the movie industry that knew him
Wow.
and said, I got to introduce you to this guy. You do music for TV film. And
Yeah.
so an introduction was made to a friend of a friend. And that was when I started getting to know him better. We took he took a Zoom call, we talked, I told him what I was doing, and we just started kind of working together from then, and I sent him. So then I waited about, I think it was like a month or two, and he had a specific need for a film. And maybe this is just luck, like absolute luck, but I sent him a couple songs, and one of them actually ended up in the film. I just got lucky that song he liked, the producer liked, the director liked. It got through all the gatekeepers and worked. And once you have something like that happen, then you kind of establish trust from his side that, yeah, this guy can provide some music that works for my clients. So
This begs the question, which is so many people that have been in the traditional music industry mindset for decades think it's all about I've got a great song. And I have long contended, and everything should be great, yes, but it's about having the right song for the right thing at the right time. That's almost more important than my song is better than your song. Am I right headed? Am I thinking about that?
I I probably have 1000% agree with that from my experience. I have one real short story that'll fit that perfectly. Is that I had a song that I submitted. I actually, so here's going back to the rally. I went to one of the mentor lunches, and this was probably 2017. I handed a CD to a library owner. A couple weeks later, I got an email, like your music, we'd like to sign you as a writer. Could you submit more? And they rejected like probably 50% of my music or better at first.
Even though it was directly to them at their
Yeah.
request.
Yeah, I would send the music, and they'd say, we'll take these 2 out of 10. It was probably more like 20% actually. So over time we built a relationship, and I figured out what they liked and what they needed. And I'm like, okay, they took these 2 songs last month, and like once a month they would allow me to submit 5 or 10 songs. And so they took 2 this month. Oh, those are kind of the same as the ones last. So I started to find their wheelhouse and send the music. So long story short, one of the songs they signed was this goofy, like, it was for a taxi listing that got forwarded too. That's the crazy part of the story. And the taxi listing literally said, Jerry Lee Lewis meets Talking Heads. So if you can
Wow.
imagine how kind of strange, offbeat, quirky this is going to be. So I
Yeah,
wrote
it
a
doesn't get
song.
any quirkier than that.
I know, I wrote a song called Whiplash, and it was just this goofy song about, I don't even know what it was about. It was just about, driving through outer space. I mean, it was this crazy song, just goofy. And for some reason, this library publisher really liked it. I sent it in, and they're like, we're playing it in the office. We like it. We're going to pitch that. And I'm like, that one? I sent it in almost on a whim. So they pitched it. They were pitching it for a bunch of shows, and they would call and say, oh, we're pitching it for this show, and we think it's going to get in. Nothing happened. And then the song just kind of trailed off. And 5 years later, I get a call, that it's going to be on America's Funniest Videos. Perfect song for that, right? It was a feature on their like 100th anniversary episode. And the
Wow.
sync was crazy. It was like crazy good. And so that song
Can you
sat there.
ballpark the sync fee on that?
$10,000 sync fee.
I'm sorry?
10,000.
Wow.
Yeah, and network backend's great. I'm still, this was last January. I'm still seeing royalties on that. So all that to say, 5 years that song just sat in silence, and I thought that's a goofy thing I did for this funny taxi listing, and it was fun. It was really fun to produce, but yeah, I never thought that may see the light of day after it didn't work out for the listing. But on kind of on a whim, I pitched it to the library, and they happened to really like it. And that shows you too that your ear sometimes doesn't match what they knew. They heard something in that song, right?
Yeah.
Heard something about it. It was weird enough. It was strange enough to me. It's just like, it's as a musician, it's just strange. It's not good, I guess, if you put it. But something they heard in that song, and they pitched it for 5 years off and on, and finally found a home, the perfect home for it.
We have a direct line to the music supervisor on that show. He's a friend of Taxi, and it's really hard to get a placement on that show.
Yeah.
And he's impossible to get to if you're not in the inner circle. But man, when they